Yeah, and the extent to which they after they found the cave that they went to protect it, they had that big metal door. It looked like they carved out a big rectangular entrance, put in a big thick metal door, and then we were only allowed into the cave for like an hour at a time, or like 2 hours at a time, or whatever.
When Robbins, when he suggested it a couple of weeks ago, I just literally like the week before read an article on it, but it wasn't about that film at all. It was all about how what they've done is a few 100 meters away from the cave, they've built an entire replica, and this is since the documentary's come out.
Yeah.
So that you can go to the site of the cave, be in the mountains, and effectively go into the cave, and they don't need to worry about it decaying and condensation, etc. Because there's a model of it effectively that you can see. There's a whole replica of it.
What does that look like? Did you see pictures? Because when they mentioned Werner Herzog mentioned it in the documentary, and I was immediately skeptical about what the experience would be like.
If you knew it was a copy, you wouldn't get that feeling of like standing on hallowed ground type of thing. Sure. You probably would.
But that thing you mentioned about hallowed ground, Jem, and you have, I think, brought it to life. I think maybe better than they maybe did in the film, and that's probably my question to you guys is that did you fully feel the weight of the length of time, like the sheer distance between us now in the present day and 30,000 years ago, and what that actually means? Like that for me, if you actually can get with that, is mind-blowing, is absolutely mind-blowing. And just like you say, Jem, the fact that there was stuff that was 32,000 years ago and stuff that then was left 27,000 years ago, and you just because they say those two things together, you go, oh wow, that's far, but it's still relatively close. And then you go, okay, rewind 5,000 years from now, and where are we, like from a civilization point of view? And you're just like, it's just, these are just crazy gulfs of time that those illustrations have been made. And I just want to know, did you feel that they helped you appreciate that within the film, or did you kind of have to get that yourself?
I think go on, Liam.
All I'll say is that I what you just said was incredible. Like the actual realization of that is incredible, but I actually felt the opposite. Watching the documentary, I felt very close. I felt like the Gulf of Pine was made to seem very, very close, as if, it was.
It hasn't changed.
It just felt like not very long ago that these things were made. The drawings were so well formed, so well preserved, and the stories that were kind of brought up, and tied together or linked with the paintings that were seen, by these various archaeologists, and the experience that they articulated, which was, almost as if that they were being watched by the people in the cave. I really got the sense of a kind of conflation of time, like.
That's definitely what we
were there in the cave, around the time that these things were drawn. So I didn't get the sense of the gulf, that huge, very huge, like almost like inconceivable number of years since they were drawn. But it's very interesting to have to reconcile those two different things, because I think the feeling is that you're there in the moment at the time, and at the same time you're nowhere near. You're nowhere near. It's so far back in human history.
No, I'd say I'm in the middle of both of that, to be honest. I'm more on the fence of the whole thing. I'm absolutely in amazement at the how long ago it was. It's so, and I think it puts that across really well. But I'm actually almost more in awe at the fact that we as human beings and as human race haven't actually come that far in that amount of time. We're so similar, even though it's 27 to 32,000 years ago. I was more in awe at how we haven't changed that much. The way that we are, the way that we act, the way that our minds work haven't changed that much. To the benefit of the documentary, 100%. I wouldn't say it was to I wouldn't say it damaged it at all. It's just a different perspective to put on it, isn't it?
That to me, Guy, was to both you and Lee, was probably the beauty that I was getting at before, is that he makes you feel that humans' relationship with art hasn't changed that much, but then they kind of surround the documentary with all this stuff where they show, I keep referring to like the technology they used for hunting and stuff like that, and you think, God, our relationship with technology has changed so much, but yet all of what they're showing with art and our appreciation for, beauty and everything is still very human and the same. And that for me was the beauty of the film in itself, being able to appreciate both of those points.
I think Tom didn't appreciate that point, James. He said enough
there.
He didn't appreciate it at all.
He's like, fuck, I watched the wrong film, fellas.
I watched Tango.
The closing point they had was quite a nice way to round it off, actually, all about how Homo sapiens in Latin is wise man. Because we were the ones that use our heads versus the Neanderthals type thing, and he said actually maybe it's more appropriate that we should be called Homo spiritualis.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice way to round it off. But I think
was that the same dude that was using his smell to get into the
no.
No, it was the guy that was trying to hunt horses, I think.
Well,
the one that looked like Einstein.
Trying to throw spears. Yeah.
Werner Herzog was giving him a little bit of beef, wasn't he, at his throwing technique?
Yeah, he may not be as talented as they were back then. You're not very good at it, are you?
Until I got used to him narrating, I've not watched the documentary before. Until I got used to him narrating it, I just couldn't imagine that voice coming from someone other than sitting behind a table surrounded by stormtroopers.
Yeah.
I really liked him narrating it, actually. I thought that his narration was the most interesting bit. I actually thought some of the interviews were pretty...
He's got such an interesting voice.
I thought some of the interviews were pretty... They didn't add much to it, some of them. Especially the one with the guys like, oh yeah, I started dreaming of lions or whatever, and it's just it didn't really add another dimension to it. Some of the interviews that he did, his narration and storytelling over the top was way more powerful.
Sorry to interrupt. Who was the long-haired dude, like the archaeologist sitting at the computer?
That's what Guy's talking
that's
about.
The guy. Yeah.
I found his point about that laser technology that they'd used to kind of create like a morphological kind of like intersection of the cave. That stuff was fascinating, and especially the image that they'd come up with. That's what
I used to do at uni. We used to use those 3D laser mapping points. And I saw that. I was like, I'm obviously going to talk about this during the review.
Yeah.
Isn't that an example? Isn't that an example though of how technology and our relationship with the world has gone? Yeah.
Cool, man. Gub,
what did you think? What did you think?
So, apologies for joining late. I've missed everyone else's opinion, so I guess I'm coming to it fresh. I thought the subject matter was incredible. There's no doubting that. I know I did history at university, so obviously I find it fascinating, anything to do with history in the past. And I thought that I briefly heard you guys mentioning the timescales always kind of boggle the mind, and it's kind of hard to process the number of years when you look back to some of the archaeological wonders of the world, and then this is another kind of X thousand years older than those. It's kind of incredible. I found the delivery of the entire, whether we call it feature film or we call it documentary, I guess it's debatable. But
feature-length.
I found it. We've had that little discussion.
I found yeah. So I won't delve into that, but I found it underwhelming. I think I've watched a lot of documentaries, history documentaries, that are far more captivating, are far more enticing, and I think the method of telling the story was a lot more interactive, whether it's through kind of 3D, almost CGI modeling based on history that enables you to envisage the past a little bit clearer. I felt like it felt like a documentary you'd kind of show in school. It was almost too educational in its methods to be enjoyable for this amount of time, and that's coming from someone that really enjoys history. I also thought the interviews were lacking. I don't think they really delved deep and interrogated any of the theories in the interviews themselves. And I also found that it would have perhaps benefited from just subtitles and the people being interviewed just being able to speak their native language, because I felt that there was a struggle and almost lack of depth to the answers, and it left me wondering half the time: is this an English barrier issue? Is it just because they're awkward in front of the camera?
And it's subpart dub.
Yeah, it didn't feel that that it was engaging, and it was annoying because it's an amazing subject matter, and I could see why it was chosen for our review. But I just don't think it was executed well enough to do it justice, and I don't think you really appreciated what a monumental kind of find this cave really is.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that about the interviewees not being challenged enough on their opinions. There wasn't actually too much of it. It wasn't a two-sided argument or discussion or debate at all, was it? It was much more, tell me your experience, tell me yours. What do you think of this? And that's it.
And as a counterpoint to that, Tom, rather than a history documentary, how much was it trying to be a homage to the work of art by being more artistic itself with the music and the long panning shots? And it wasn't an informative documentary. It was more of an artistic documentary.
I get what you're saying, but then I kind of think even in that aspect it let itself down. Like, I didn't find the music really lent anything to it. I found it kind of awkward and almost mechanical a lot of the time. And then because those panning shots, which were really great, but you can achieve those quite easily nowadays with drones. I'm not sure when this documentary was made, but the landscape's obviously beautiful, but that's the landscape. Nothing was kind of really added to it. It was just kind of showing its beauty. But I found that those punctuated kind of sections where you had people like the man in the Inuit fur in the forest, I found that incredibly awkward, listening to him playing for 30 seconds. And it kind of broke it up. So I don't think it could... I get that it was more an artistic appreciation of the caves than, I guess, like a historical interrogation. But if you're looking at the film itself as a piece of film, as a piece of art, I would say it wasn't, in my opinion.
It's stuck in the middle, you think?
I just don't think. Yeah, I don't think it achieved either. I found the delivery of the whole film kind of awkward. So the first question I asked, because obviously I came into this really like not understanding the background to it. I think I maybe missed when it got chosen last week. I wasn't sure if it felt almost like the start of a horror movie at the start, where it was kind of surreal how passive the narration was, and it was quite like eerie and slow to start with, and I couldn't really understand where it was going. Did anyone else feel that, or your opinions? Because I'm coming late. Have I echoed anything? Have I contrasted anyone's?
No, we mentioned earlier that a lot of it is his voice. Yeah, he's got a great grasp of language, even translating into English. And you're right. It was, especially with a chaotic soundtrack, it was quite strange at the start.
Yeah, we agree. The sound editing was pretty whack. Like whether it complemented it or not, I don't know. Because I was saying it's not even periodical or anything like that. Like some of the choral music and stuff like that. There is no connection between the two. And I'd agree with what you said. Actually, my one serious critical point of this documentary is actually just it really dragged for me about the hour mark. I don't know why. But about an hour in, it just really slowed down for me, and the first sort of 45 minutes or so, really great. Because what we said before you came, Tom, is that the subject matter is astonishing. It's amazing. Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating. It's just it got to that hour mark, and just I don't know what it was, but just for me, it just really slowed down and dragged. And then it got to that bit, 5 or 6 minutes of showing all of the different wall art and whatnot. And I felt like skipping half of that just because I was like, how long is this bit going on for? And then it started to drag slightly. And I don't know whether that's just the pacing of the documentary as a whole, or whether that's it sort of established the factual points it wanted to make, and then after that it felt like it would just make another 20 minutes up or so, or 25 minutes and fill. But I don't know, the pacing of it was fine to start off with, but it just that hour mark or so really dragged for me.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a question I'll reflect James's question from earlier on, because I think it's interesting here now. Or to you, Tom.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that the production value wasn't really there. Well, it wasn't really, particularly high. It was noticeably, budget, let's say. The editing wasn't really that great. It felt a little bit choppy and a bit mishmashed at times.